There's a very specific feeling I get whenever I fire up NES Probotector 2, and it hits me before the gameplay even starts. It's that soft electrical buzz of the old TV, the click of the NES power switch, and then those unmistakable opening visuals. Robotic warriors, alien threats, and that pulsing soundtrack that seems to say, "Get ready, this won't be easy." Every time those metallic, futuristic sprites slide onto the screen, it takes me straight back to the days when I was convinced I was playing the toughest, coolest game ever made. For anyone who doesn't know, Probotector 2 is basically the European version of Contra Super C, except with robots instead of humans. When I was a kid, I didn't think much about regional differences or censorship. Robots were just cool. But now, looking back on it, those robot designs are a huge part of my nostalgia. They gave the game this extra sci-fi flair that made it feel even more intense than the usual run-and-gun action. But nostalgia alone isn't the reason we're here. We're in 2025. The gaming landscape has evolved like crazy, and the big question is, should you play NES Probotector 2 today? Does the game still hold up? Does it still deliver the kind of experience modern gamers would enjoy? To find out, I went back and played through the whole thing again, not just with childhood memories guiding me, but with a modern gaming mindset. And let me tell you, rediscovering this game has been a wild experience. The first thing that hit me is how tight and responsive the controls still feel. Probotector 2 wastes no time. You start the game, and before you even get comfortable, enemies are flying in from every direction. You're dodging bullets, jumping over pits, weaving between explosions, all while trying to keep your firepower upgraded. And even after all these years, the game's controls are sharp. There's no input delay, no weird movement quirks. Every jump, every shot, every slide feels deliberate. That's something a lot of people underestimate about NES action games. They had to be precise because they didn't have the luxury of complex animations or advanced physics. And Probotector 2 nails that precision perfectly. As I moved through the early stages, I got hit with another wave of realization. This game might actually feel more modern than some modern shooters. Not in graphics or presentation, obviously, but in the way it demands your attention. You can't half focus on Probotector 2. You can't play it while listening to a podcast or scrolling on your phone. It demands your full concentration every second. And in a world where multitasking is almost the default way of playing games, that kind of focus is surprisingly refreshing. Then there's the difficulty. As a kid, Probotector 2 felt impossibly hard. I remember the frustration of losing power-ups right before a boss fight, or getting overwhelmed by enemies in tight corridors. And the game hasn't exactly gotten easier with age. But now I can appreciate something I didn't understand back then. The difficulty is fair. Enemies have patterns. Bosses have tells. Level hazards are consistent. You don't die because the game is cheap. You die because you didn't react fast enough. And every time you retry a stage, you get just a little bit better. That loop, die, retry, improve, is something modern gamers love. Just look at games like Cuphead, Celeste, Hades, or the Souls series. The idea of being challenged, learning patterns, and slowly mastering a game is just as popular today as it was in the NES era. Probotector 2 was doing that long before it became mainstream. Now, let's talk about the visual design, because this is something I think modern players might actually appreciate more than expected. Probotector 2 has that distinct late NES look. Crisp sprites, bold colors, and environments that feel bigger than the hardware should allow. But what really stands out is how readable everything is. Enemies, platforms, bullets, hazards, they all stand out from the background in a way that makes the game feel clean. It's funny because modern gamers often complain about visual noise in big budget games. Too many effects, too much clutter, too many overlapping HUD elements. Probotector 2 is the complete opposite. What you see is what you get. No distractions, no cinematic filler, just pure action flowing from one moment to the next. And speaking of action, the variety in gameplay is something I forgot about until I replayed it. Most people think of Probotector 2 and Contra games as straightforward run and guns, but the game mixes things up a lot. You've got the side-scrolling sections, top-down sections, base infiltration areas, and boss encounters that feel completely different than the stages leading up to them. Even today, the pacing holds up really well. Just when you think you're getting used to a certain style of play, the game shifts gears and throws you something new at you. But of course, not everything has aged perfectly. If you're a modern gamer used to saving anywhere, auto checkpoints, or infinite retries, the structure of Probotector 2 might feel old-fashioned. When you lose lives, you feel it. When you lose your weapon power-ups, you really feel it. And there's no story cutscene to slow things down or explain what's happening. You're simply dropped into the action with the expectation that you'll figure it out on the fly. For me, that's part of the charm, but for someone who's never touched an NES controller, it could be a bit of a shock. One thing that stands out today more than it did when I was younger is how short the game is. A skilled player can beat it in under an hour, but honestly, that's pretty normal for NES games. The real longevity isn't in the length, it's in the mastery. You replay levels to improve, learn patterns, and perfect your run, and that gives Probotector 2 a kind of replay value that doesn't wear out after one session. Now, looking at this from a more modern gaming perspective, I think what might surprise people most is how timeless the core loop feels. When you strip away the retro graphics and the limitations of the hardware, what you have is a tight, fast-paced, pattern-based action game that rewards skill and punishes hesitation. That kind of gameplay hasn't gone out of style. If anything, players appreciate it today because of how saturated the industry has become with overly guided experiences. That brings us back to the big question: should you play NES Probotector 2 today? And my honest answer is yes, but with the right expectations. If you're going into it expecting a modern shooter, a cinematic story, or a long campaign, you're going to be disappointed. The game is tough, short, and completely unforgiving. But if you want a pure action experience, something that tests your reflexes, your pattern recognition, and your ability to stay focused, then Probotector 2 still absolutely delivers. In fact, it delivers in a way that many modern games simply can't. For me, revisiting Probotector 2 wasn't just fun, it was meaningful. It reminded me of why I fell in love with games in the first place. The thrill of overcoming something difficult, the excitement of getting a perfect run, the satisfaction of mastering a level that once felt impossible. Those moments shaped how I look at games even today. So yes, if you're curious, if you love retro games, or if you just want a challenge that's pure and straightforward, Probotector 2 is still worth your time. It's more than a relic of the past. It's a reminder of how beautifully simple and rewarding game design can be. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a classic, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know which retro game you want me to explore next. I've got a lot more memories and a lot more cartridges still waiting.